difficulties right now. We're going to get started meeting. The comments to order at 6:03 p.m. on Tuesday, January 19th. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Stanley Recreation Center Advisory Committee meeting. At this time, I'd like to ask Selena to lead us in prayer.
Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking first for your guidance and your mercy while we conduct our meeting. We want to thank you, Lord, just for being who you are, exactly who you are, and thank you for all that you have done, are doing, and will do in our community and over these meetings. I ask that we have a sound heart and minds and shared vision as we go forth as representatives for our community, for the betterment of those affected by the building of the Stanley White Recreation Center. We ask your love and your protection and a hedge of protection around all of the committee members, our community leaders, our government leaders, and our faith leaders, and most importantly, our community members. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Amen. I'm going to go on another round.
Thank you, Selena. At this time, we'll have our pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Jennifer, if you'll do a roll call, please.
Leander Morgan. And you can unmute yourself to...
I am here.
Okay.
I'm here.
Thank you. Talina Massey.
Present.
James Woods.
Present.
Bernard White.
Present.
Reginald Pender.
Present.
Elijah Brown Jr.
Present.
Barbara Lee. No Barbara Lee. Curtis Stewart.
Present.
Jamisha Harris. Jamisha's not on here. And then Foster Hughes.
Present. This time, I'd like to ask everyone to approve the minutes. And if anyone would like to make the motion, you're welcome to do so.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes as given. Bernard White.
That motion.
Okay, that was a motion by Mr. White.
Yes.
And who made that second?
Oh, I did, James
Mr. Woods.
Okay, Mr. Woods made the second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, folks, at this time, we're going to turn the presentation over to our CPL consultants, and they're going to review several things for us tonight. So Reggie and Rachel, whenever you're ready.
All right. Sounds good. Let me know if you can't hear me. And also, I just want to point out that I don't want this to be that much of a presentation, so feel free to jump in anytime during this and ask any questions. You don't have to wait until the end. If we were sitting there in front of you, we'd have printouts and we could all talk about it, but that's the nature of the way that we're doing things right now. So again, feel free at any time, unmute yourself and ask any questions that you've got or make any comments. Let's see. So I want just to take everybody, I know it's been a couple months, hope everyone's had a really good holiday in between. take you through the process that we went through. We did that community engagement. We moved to the programming phase, and we had that programming activity in person at the West New Bern Rec Center. And then in the meantime, what our team has been doing is working on the conceptual design, site design, master planning piece, looking at how that engagement moved and informed that program and then informed the building piece. Just to summarize some of those engagement findings, these are the same slides that we had at our last public meeting. Just wanted to throw these up there since it's been a little bit. Spaces, needs within the building that were important, room for education space, test kitchen, families, comprehensive rec center, the aspect for rentals and community events, some outdoor space needs, making sure that it's walkable, maybe the amphitheater at Henderson Park, stormwater as an education tool. Some of the feedback we got from the youth, space for everyone to come together, do different kinds of activities, space for after-school programs, after-school activities, study spaces. And activities, what activities would people participate in, or what did they use? Those court spaces, those activity rooms, those game rooms were really important at the old facility. And moving forward, what kinds of things are important in the design of this facility? So those well-lit outdoor areas, safety, security, and making sure that the activities and programs offered fit the community needs. In terms of the highest rated spaces that people would like to see in a new rec center, those community meeting spaces, catering, teaching kitchen, media room, walking track, and the other was people who checked basically every single one of these items. And what kinds of programs, activities would people want to participate in? Computer classes, cooking, nutrition classes, senior activity spaces, fitness and dance classes, and a combination of all of those. Reggie, did you want to jump in here with a quick environmental assessment update?
Sure, I'll give a brief update. Good afternoon or good evening and Happy New Year to everyone. As we walk through this process, as we've noted, an environmental assessment is necessary in accordance with FEMA standards and policy. So we've been developing that assessment over the past few weeks. We submitted a partial draft for review and should have the 95% draft complete within the next week or so. Just a couple of comments on the EA and some of the things that we're going to be focusing on. The extensive outreach program that we went through beginning in September. We heard a lot of different comments, a lot of different values, a lot of different opinions, and we started the process with figuring out what goes in the building, and so that space and what's important there is very important through 3 significant outreach efforts for the community outside of the 4 small group sessions. And obviously these meetings as well. The last meeting, we had some really good input, and through all of these meetings, that input will be reflected in the document. A few things stand out. Obviously the space and the programs, the absence of the facility is certainly felt in that community right now. Safety is a key issue, and in just a bit, you're going to see some concept site plan that we're putting together. And we'll talk a little bit about how we're focusing on that. By far, the biggest issue that we heard during the last public session was the floodplain and that existing facility being in the floodplain. Since that meeting, we spent some time with city staff, getting a greater understanding of the things that have been done and that have been planned as a part of the facility. We took a hard look at what's called a drainage basin and a sub-basin and how that plays together. We also discovered the city's doing quite a few things as it relates to the neighborhood, the community, and the floodplain itself, there is a fairly extensive grants program that is in place that has really, it's broad-based, but it has two really primary things that we'll talk about again and document in the EA. One of those is an investment and reinvestment on the recreation side, and the other is floodplain mitigation and floodplain or the floodplain impact reduction activities associated with a master plan the city undertook a few years ago. And again, once that document is complete, you'll be able to see a little bit more of that kind of moving forward. So that's just kind of a brief overview. And again, when that document is complete, the committee as well as others will have a chance to take a look at it. Thank you.
Thanks, Reggie. So the next thing that we did after our last activity, our programming activity, was start to look at the program for this building, putting together, looking at the spaces that you all talked about in that session and said these were some of the most important spaces to include, and the spaces that came out of all of our engagement, and looking at both of those things in conjunction with the city's Parks and Rec department and their goals and their needs for the future in order to serve the city. So this is kind of how we do that. We put that together. We look at what those spaces are. We look at the approximate sizes of those. We look at where those need to be within the building. And then the next thing that we do is we start to develop that concept floor plan. And so this on the screen here is our concept floor plan for the Stanley White Recreation Center. I'll just highlight a couple things. Hopefully you can see my mouse. But the entrance point, vestibule, those blue spaces are some of the support spaces.
Rachel.
So we have those needed support spaces. We have included a health screening room because that did come back as a community request, a community need, as something that was really necessary. We've got the kitchen, and that can be used for demo, that can be used for instruction, that can be used for catering, concessions. 3 multi-purpose rooms. We talked a lot in our last session about really needing to have that kind of flexibility to have the big meetings, have the small meetings. So 3 multi-purpose rooms that can open to create 1 larger room or a small room and a medium-sized room. 2 basketball courts. A game room, bringing that game room concept back over from the old Stanley White Center, making sure that that lives on at the new center as well, and including a media lab esports room to really bring in some of those for some of the teen activities, especially, but also an opportunity for seniors for potentially having computers there for the neighborhood and for the community. And this is a 2-level facility that we're looking at.
Hey, Rachel?
Yes.
Hey.
Rachel, can you hear me?
Yes.
Rachel, go back to that first page. Can you zoom in on that lower level so they can see it a little bit better?
I'm sorry?
Can you zoom in on the lower part of that image there so they can see those rooms a little bit closer?
I've never tried that on PowerPoint, but it looks like it works. So I'll hold right there for a minute.
Rachel, I have a question. Curtis here.
Yes.
Based on this plan that you're presenting, what is the square footage of this building?
This building is around the 27 to 33,000 square foot range.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
I'm going to zoom out, but again, I can come back to these
Rachel, I have
as
a question.
well. And then
Rachel?
looking at that second floor.
We have another question.
Rachel,
So that second floor provides an opportunity for a walking track around those 2 gyms. It provides, and I'll zoom in here as well, an exercise studio, fitness room for some of the classes, fitness classes, and then a large weight cardio room, about 3 times the size of the room that was at the old Stanley White Recreation Center, to allow for, and that can be opportunities for cardio equipment, for dumbbells, weight equipment, things like that.
Rachel,
Yes.
we've got another question.
Yep.
Rachel, can you hear me?
A little bit.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Really quick, the floor plan that we're seeing right now, for which location is this?
For which location?
Yes.
So I'll get into that in a minute, but this floor plan, I'll get into that in a minute when we get to the site plan question. Is that okay if I address that then?
Sure.
And so conceptually, this could be the exterior of that facility. This would be looking down 3rd Avenue. So this particular on the site plan that we're showing is a 3rd Avenue site plan. There is not a site determined at this point. But in order to, this building could be located at the Henderson Park site. In order to do that, there would have to be a scope change request to FEMA, because the building is larger than that 18,000 square foot footprint. The front of the building.
I have a question, I'm sorry.
Yes.
And so is that request one that has been considered already, or is that request one that is not? I kind of recall in a conversation from the FEMA rep there at West New Bern, saying that if the site was built back there, unfortunately, the square footage could not increase. Am I hearing you now say that potentially you could make a request for that?
Our understanding is that you could make a request for that. There is no guarantee that that request would be accepted.
What are some of the criteria around that request that FEMA would require?
And I think Chelsea Klein should probably respond to that.
Say that one more time.
I said, I believe Chelsea Klein with FEMA, she's on the call. She should respond to that question.
Great.
Hi, this is Chelsea. So that would be a program decision. So I'm trying to pull up the policy as we speak to get the exact verbiage on that. So let me find that so I can get the exact language on that. So stand by and I'll get that answer for you.
Okay, and just to clarify, you said a programming clarification?
Correct. So I
You're cutting out on me. I can't
work
hear
for
you.
environmental public assistance, which is the funding mechanism. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're cutting out a little bit, but say that one more time. I'm sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you.
Okay. So, yes, so I work in environmental planning and historic preservation, and we support public assistance, and public assistance is the program that funds this, and it's their decision to make about putting it back in the location and the square footage. So I'm trying to find the program answer for that. We might not be able to get it to you tonight if I can't find it. If not, I will get it to Foster and Reggie so they can get it out to the entire steering committee so that you guys have it in writing how that process works.
James Woods, I have a question.
So, hold on one second, Mr. Woods, if you don't mind. So I just want to clarify this. So there is a process that can take place where if that building was to be considered to be put back in the same location, there is a request that can be made where the building could potentially be a larger size and square footage. You're saying that FEMA does not make that decision, but there's another entity that makes that decision?
No, FEMA does make that decision, but I cannot answer that question specifically, so someone else at FEMA will have to, is what I'm saying. Does that make sense?
Well, no, yes, in the grand scheme of things, but I guess Reggie mentioned that you can provide the answer. So I'm interested in knowing that because that's new. I'm interested in knowing that now if you can find the information.
That's what I'm looking for, so I'll need a few minutes. But the project that FEMA currently has under review is a request for us to analyze the new location at that alternate site to evaluate that for this building. So that's what FEMA has now. If you change the scope of work, then the city needs to let FEMA know, and there's a process that they have to go through to do that.
Okay, one last question from my standpoint, and I appreciate that. So now the reconsideration that you have currently, right, that's been resubmitted by the city once they found this new location, correct?
Correct.
Is that, okay. And so the information that you just provided, which was that you can request that it be built back in the same location at a larger square footage. Have you guys provided that information to the city or Foster?
Who are
Prior
you?
prior to now?
Like I said, the FEMA project that I have to review is the request to analyze the alternate location.
Okay, so, but I just want to be clear on one more thing. So what I'm hearing you say that is understanding the request that's before you guys, I understand that, the second request. We have a new location, can we consider moving it here? I'm saying the information that you just provided, has that been privy to the city as a whole, that they could request that that location be built back in the same location and the square footage could be asked to be increased? That is my question.
I cannot answer that because that would have been a discussion with the delivery manager.
Got it, okay.
I can't answer that. But I can ask the program delivery manager if he knows if that conversation has happened.
No, I have a better one for you. Foster, were you guys aware of that information?
I don't think we were aware of that, no. And
Say that, I can't quite hear you.
I do not think we were aware of that, but I do want to say that the Board of Aldermen voted back last May or June to change the scope of work, and that's why we're going through the environmental assessment with FEMA on this. That's where we are now.
No, I understand that. But what I'm saying is a very direct question that I think is very important. I'm saying that was the city aware that not only could you submit for relocating the building because you found an alternate location, right? I understand that, right? And you guys did that. I'm also saying, understanding what was just provided, were you guys aware, the city as a whole, that you also could submit to FEMA and this other arm that they have to say, hey, we want to put it back in the same location. Can we also build it bigger here, understanding the current climate? Were you guys aware of that?
Can I jump in, Kurt? Thank you so much for bringing that to
Kanisha, I appreciate you jumping in, but I'm asking Foster a question that I think he should be able to respond to.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm not sure that I'm aware of that, no.
Okay.
I would have to go back and look through notes, to be quite honest with you, because we've had a lot of meeting with FEMA over the last literally 2 years. So I would have to go back and speak to our consultants, to be honest with you.
Hello?
Yes, sir,
Thank
Mr.
you,
Woods.
Curtis.
I can't hear. Did Curtis get done?
I don't see him on here.
He might have dropped off.
Okay. The problem I have with what was just said, throughout this whole process, we were told, the board, the members, the public, everyone, that if the building was built back where it is now, the largest it could have been was 18,000 square foot. It had to be in the same footprint. Now I hear today.
I'm here. Oh. Yeah, somehow I got cut out of the meeting here. But I'm sorry, Mr. Woods, to cut you off. But yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm gonna mute myself. But I didn't hear the last thing you said, Foster, other than you said you were not aware of that. And what was the last thing you said in regards to that?
I said I'd have to go back and look through notes, but I am not aware of that. And matter of fact, Mr. Woods, go ahead and continue with what you were going to say.
What I was saying is, I understand where Curtis is going with this, because we have been told throughout this whole process that the largest the building could be on the on the site it is now is 18,000 square foot. It had to be in the same footprint as the old building. Now we come to a meeting in January today, and you're telling us there's a possibility that the building can be almost 27,000 square foot on the Henderson Park location. That needs to be clarified tonight before we get off this call.
Well, it's already clarified. It's already clarified.
Well, I mean, FEMA needs to clarify that. Whatever she was looking for, she needs to find that and clarify that. Because see, now we're at the same toggle that we've been at all along. The citizens cannot trust the city in doing what they said they're going to do. Because you're telling us now there's a possibility that the building can be built back where it's at 27,000 square foot. So we've wasted a year arguing or talking about moving this building to the 3rd Avenue location, and it can be built where it's at with a larger building.
I mean, that's baffling to me that the city wouldn't know that.
Yeah.
And if it's a third party, stance, the consulting company, or better yet, FEMA, Chelsea, if it's your stance that, hey, we can only evaluate what was presented to us, which is the city of New Bern access to evaluate this new location, and now you're saying, and I know it's, I'm sure these Zoom calls are recorded. I know there was a conversation before to say that you couldn't put it back in the same location at a bigger building. And to learn that now, I mean, that's disheartening. I mean, that's what this has all been about for folks from the beginning, is just transparency and being honest with folks. And that's not right. I mean, I think there's some, and I heard you, is your name, the gentleman, African American gentleman that's from the consulting company, what's your name again?
Reggie.
Hello?
That's Reggie Scale.
Reggie
Yeah,
Scale.
my name's Reggie Scale.
Mr. Reggie, and I heard you say something in regards to earlier about the environmental, about the drainage and some other things with the city. Well, I know there's another group that's requested, some attorneys that's requested documentation from the city about the drainage there in that area, and I don't think it looks too favorable. But I mean, what I'm hearing right now, and I hate to say this, but what I'm hearing right now is very problematic and could potentially be a lawsuit, because that's ridiculous. That's not ethical. What we're hearing tonight.
Yeah, I can't speak on the EA and that process. I can talk to you about the floodplain if you got questions there.
This is Chelsea. So a couple of things. One, I cannot find the specific policy
Chelsea, you're
about
breaking
relocation,
up.
so I'm going to have to
breaking up. Can you repeat that again? Because you were breaking up.
Sorry. So I cannot find the specific answer in the policy, and so program is going to have to answer that question, and regrettably it's 6:30 your time, and I emailed my counterparts to see if I can get an answer, but it'll likely have to be tomorrow. And then number two, we are still FEMA is still working with CPL and the city on the environmental assessment, so no final decision has been made yet as to where the location of the building is, and the city would have to go to FEMA and ask them about staying in place. But since they've already submitted us the letter for us to relocate, that's the avenue we're pursuing. So if the city has changed their mind about staying in place, they would have to let FEMA know, because that's the process for public assistance.
But Chelsea, the only reason I understand that the city asked for the building to be moved was because we were told that we could not have a bigger building, that the building would have to be on the same footprint, 18,000 square foot. Now, that's what was told to us all along. Now we hear tonight that there's a probability, whether or not it's 1% or 99%, but there's a probability that a larger building can be built at Henderson Park.
And
So
Mr.
all of a
Woods,
sudden, there's this miraculous thing they're saying that it could be built there. If it doesn't matter if the city knew it when they submitted the change, or or now it came about, somebody other than us knew this.
And
Somebody
Mr.
other
Woods,
than
this is
tonight
Foster.
knew this.
This is Foster Hughes.
This is something that I, as a representation of the city, have been explaining and saying from day one. When we had that special called meeting about Stanley White and then switching it over to the new location, is Corey not available to answer this question? Because this is what I've been bringing up the whole time, is that we were under the understanding that it's a possibility that this building could be built back here. And then, because another property was purchased, that's where it was geared to. They had to switch over and do a new application because the majority of the board wanted it to be relocated. But I've been trying to say for the longest that I knew that there was a possibility it could be built back here based on FEMA. And if Corey could answer that question, because I know Corey is very familiar from my understanding, because again, like they were saying, it's always been the narrative from the perspective, from what I've heard from Corey or whoever, that it couldn't be any bigger than what it was.
That, Alderwoman Harris, that has been my understanding, that basically if it's built back on that property, it couldn't be any larger than the 18,000 square foot footprint, and it would have to basically have the same type of rooms while the facade can change. We can get clarification from Corey, but that has been my understanding.
So how are we here tonight, like Kurt and James are saying, with this conversation of it being a bigger square footage? How are we able to have this productive conversation if that's not what the city has even applied for? Because all I know is the city applied, Corey and them, and you filled out the application for it to be resubmitted for the new location based on that area. So how are we able to even discuss these plans on a bigger square footage if
this concept plan is based on the 3rd Avenue location? It is not based on the Henderson Park location, based on the environmental assessment that the city is going through.
Yeah. Foster, I don't know if you have a speakerphone going or what's going there, or you're talking to a computer, but listen, man, the bottom line is this here, okay? And unfortunately, FEMA just did their job. I mean, you guys submitted this thing on the premise of a new location, when in fact, it could have been submitted on the premise of leaving it where it's at and asking for a larger square footage. I mean, that's the bottom line what we're hearing tonight. I mean, no matter what the city decided to do, that's what you guys decided to do. But unfortunately, it's been disclosed tonight that you could have submitted it in a different fashion to ask for what the community's been asking for the whole time. And that's the unfortunate part. I mean, unfortunate. That is a very unfortunate part of this beginning of this call, is that you've learned that you could have submitted it the way that the citizens wanted it done in the first place. That's the bottom line.
I'm not aware that we could have submitted it. And the reason the environmental assessment was asked for the change of scope is to move the building out of the flood zone, which was Henderson Park. We can get clarification from you, for you.
I have a comment to make, please. This is Rob Morgan. The question was asked and answered. Could this building be placed on the current property at the Henderson Park? And that question was asked, could it be put there? And it was answered, yes, that it could. In as much as what you're talking about is an environmental study that's going to take place, that it has to be out of the flood zone, what your citizens are going to see is that you're saying that it can't be put back in our neighborhood. And I think that's where the public trust is going to come in as much as they don't have a vote, but they also have public meetings, that has been the main concern of the residents that have come out to these meetings, is that they would like it to be put back in the same place. And this never came up to any of the residents in the public meetings, that yes, there was a possibility, whether it be by application, whether it be by informing the city and the city coming forth and changing whatever type of paperwork that they had to, but it was never brought forth in a public meeting that yes, something on the 27,000 to 33,000 square foot realm could be placed back on this property. Thank you.
We're not aware that something of that square foot can be put on that property yet. Now, we are aware that if the building were to go back in the Henderson Park location, it would have to be elevated to meet the building codes. And I am aware that it would have to, as of right now, that it would have to go, if it went back, it would have to be a 18,000 square foot building the way it was before. That's what the original grant was from FEMA and the state to put a building back in that location for $8 million to elevate it at the 18,000 square foot footprint.
These are going to be some very interesting minutes, and I do appreciate Mrs. Klein coming forth and giving forth the information that she did give, because that's what we're talking about right now. We're talking about transparency, and we're just talking about what should come forth in these public meetings.
So, Foster, based on what she's saying, do we need to, we're going to continue with this, but how are we going to follow up with the information of finding concrete information on what she stated in regards to that? If possible, the city has the ability to submit an application to keep it in the same location and ask for bigger square footage. What are we doing with that? Are we bringing this information back to the board? What are we doing?
So what we will do is, if no one has a problem with this, we will continue with CPL's presentation this evening. I will speak to our FEMA consultant, Corey, and I'm sure I'll be hearing from Chelsea Klein at some point tomorrow to get information. I'll then have a conversation with the city manager and see how he would like to proceed.
Okay, and is this meeting recorded so that people can see it after it's viewed?
The meeting is being recorded.
Okay, thank you.
So, Foster, if I could, this is Reggie Scales. The question at hand, I think that response does need to come from FEMA, Chelsea, and my recommendation would be that we just hold for a moment in terms of where we stand right now and get the steering committee a response, and then we can come back and begin the discussion, because everything else that we're doing right now, from my perspective, I'm not sure that it's going to support our efforts long term. So my recommendation would be let's just pause until we get an answer and then begin the discussion.
I agree with you, Reggie. I think it's going to be counterproductive if there's a new discovery with this Stanley White situation.
This is
I definitely second that.
And not only that, I agree with what's being said.
So I want to remind you, but
I would like to see it in writing. Okay, I don't want anybody's word. I want to see it in writing, saying that that whatever Chelsea has to find out, that we see that in writing. Because see, we're right back where we started at. This is being seen by citizens on Channel 3. They've heard the same thing we've heard. Right now, I have a mistrust in my mind about what's going on. Because, see, all along, I was told that it cannot be put back there. It had to be at the 18,000 square foot footprint. That's what's been said the last 2 years.
Yeah.
White speaking. We went through this and had Reggie stated, we probably need to stop right here, because we all was told that if it went back in the same footprint, that would only be the same size. And then the night we had that meeting, the person that I talked to the person who was over all that, who was supposed to be handling the paperwork, but he spent more time talking about moving down the street than he did building back at the same spot.
Yeah.
So the conversation has always been down the street and not in the Stanley White site. So I think we need to get a little bit more information do like Reggie was talking about. Because we hit a wall here, and they were stating that if we built back the same place, that it couldn't be no larger, even though it elevated up, it couldn't be no larger. So by moving it down the street, we had one about twice the size, and we had a bigger stadium and bigger everything to go along with us. But we just need to know that to satisfy the people, because I just like to have it built.
Well, here's and can I pivot off that in terms of getting it built? So the first day we walked in here, the first things we heard at the first meeting, this facility needs to be reestablished. It's critical to the community in terms of its fabric and everything surrounding it. So I would recommend that we pause for a moment, but I would not recommend that it take 3 or 4 weeks. And so what I would say is there's a schedule in place. My recommendation would be let's get an answer from FEMA and then find a date sometime in the next few days to reconvene and continue this discussion.
Yeah, but the unfortunate part about this is here. You know, people have been complaining. I heard the city folks say, hey, the citizens have held us up. We're prolonged with this a year. We're prolonged with this thing because of them fighting this. But now we're about to be prolonged even more because folks know that you can move it. So that's the one thing that's about to come up. And you can't, ultimately, the only way to make this right is the board of aldermen. I mean, that's the bottom line to what we're talking about right now. That's the only thing that you can do. This has to go back before the board of aldermen. So I don't know what the plan is from here, but I mean, that's, the unfortunate part is this is going to still hold up the place being built back, because now you got to go back through another process. Because if you know
the plan, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But also with what Curtis is saying, the city is putting in has a drainage thing that they're getting ready to do over on the Biddle Street side. How is that going to affect the drainage at the Stanley White? I believe that that's going to help the drainage on the Stanley White side. So therefore, I don't think the building is going to have to be raised up as high as everybody think it's going to be. Okay, now I know at the last alderman meeting, they just got a $150,000 grant to go along with the monies that they already have to fix the Biddle Street pumps and all of that. So, you know, I'm looking at this, the whole big picture of this. And then you guys come back, I just can't keep from not going back to what was said tonight. This needs to stop, and we need to find an answer in writing how it's going to affect everything. Hold on. Tonight, also to include the Biddle Street pumpers, how all of that's going to affect that Stanley White site.
So Reggie, what I'm a little confused about is we literally had this conversation at the gym when we were cutting out, and that question was asked. We asked, that was recorded because we were there. I know Robbie, everybody was there. We asked, will it be able to be a bigger square footage? And we were told that night that it couldn't be any bigger. So I'm confused what happened from that day when we were cutting out squares to now for it to be a statement that now all of it is a simple application being submitted in. Because if that was the case, I would have been fighting from that from day one for that to be done.
It's politics. What are you talking about?
But politics on what side?
But this
on
isn't
what
right,
side,
guys.
though?
Foster, this isn't right. So the bottom line, we're going to keep spinning wheels. Foster, again, I don't know how many citizens is watching this and how this goes, but the city has a little issue, and the only way to make it right is put that building back where it goes at. And Foster, I challenge you with making it right, because you guys should have gave people that information, buddy. That wasn't good. You guys shouldn't have done that. So somebody has to make that right, but we're talking about the same thing. So it's politics. You're a politician, Jamisha. You guys are voting. The board at the end of the day are the people that have to vote to move it or not anyway.
Right,
so now
Curtis, and you understand that I'm only one vote, and I've always been 6-1 in this situation. So this new information to know that it should be built back and be in a bigger square footage, you best believe when I go back to the meeting next Tuesday under new business, it will be brought up to say, why have we never gotten this information from our FEMA representatives, and why did we never submit this application? It's always been said that FEMA had to determine whether it could be built back in that same location, and I've said that from day one. So I understand the whole politician thing, but best believe I've been here from day one advocating for it to be built back in that same location, giving alternative plans. So let's just be correct on that one. It's other people on the board that have alternative motives for it to be in the new location. So again, this is very surprising to me to find out these new discoveries, and the only way that we could rectify the situation is to find concrete evidence from FEMA on how it needs to be approached, and then from there I will bring it back to the board as a representation of the board and this committee to see what happened and where the ball was dropped. And that's, once we get that information, then we can reconvene this meeting.
Yeah, the problem with what you just said, though, again, I'm pretty straightforward, is that on 5/26, there's meeting minutes from the Board of Aldermen, 4/28, and I may be off on that date, but in the month of April, there's a meeting where you make a motion for the city to buy that property, and you guys unanimously voted 7-0 to buy that property up the street there. So just be careful.
And I've explained that on April 25th.
I listened to you. Let me finish what I'm saying.
And I'm going to follow up.
So be careful with what you just said. But the bottom line to it is right here. And I'm not a politician. I'm a businessman. And I get it at the end of the day. The problem is the city, Foster, you guys should have told people that there was a possibility that you could put it back there. Unfortunately, we know from the beginning you didn't want to, and I get it. It probably doesn't make sense in some capacities. But people were not honest, man. And that's what's going to come back to bite folks. And that's the end of what I have to say. We can talk all day about this, but the next step needs to be getting this in front of that board so these things could be talked about. The unfortunate part, again, I'll end with this, is it really only affects the citizens because we're talking about we need to get it back, but we've just come across a whole nother stumbling block that's going to take a whole nother process. So, Ms. Chelsea, if you're here, are you here, ma'am?
I'm going to answer before she speaks to what you're saying.
Hold
on one second, because we are on a public platform and you're trying to call out facts and we need to make sure they're correct. It was April 25th, and I do make a motion because I represent that ward, and I stated on many occasions the reason why I voted yes is because if FEMA came back saying that it could not be built back in that same location, we have an alternative plan. That's common sense. But I've always advocated for this building to be built back in the same location. I've also spoken to Reggie and the rest of the team and provided them the information that Randy Foster created in regards to elevating it so it was a possibility that there wouldn't be a high cost of flood insurance. So please be careful on how you approach a situation when you're speaking about things that I've said and how I represent the community.
All I'll say is it's in black and white. It's public knowledge if people want to pull it. Ms. Chelsea, back to you, ma'am. Are you still here?
Yes.
Okay, my only request would be that if the city does decide to resubmit this process so that they can put it back where it's at, I would just hope that as you're, representative of FEMA, obviously these consultants are paid by the city. I would just hope whoever submits the package that you guys would try to rush it through to get approval so that it doesn't continue to hold up the citizens. If, in fact, the city does resubmit, if they don't, if they keep it like it is, I just hope you guys go ahead and approve it so the gym can be built. Bottom line, I hope they resubmit it. I don't see how they can't resubmit it. Knowing what we just learned today, I don't know how they can't submit it. So I'm just asking you on record, if you could please, whatever strings and powers to be, if you're not the person, there's other people that's been looking at this and following this. I hope someone can help expedite the process so that it doesn't continue to hold up building the thing back. And thank you for the information.
May I ask CPO?
I hear your concern, and I want to remind you that a part of the environmental assessment process is assessing both sites, the old location and the new location, and we are still there, and that's still a part of the process. So like I said, no final decision has been made, and until the environmental assessment is complete, we cannot move forward with funding this project. So I just wanted to let everybody know that we're still in that process, and should the city decide to change their application, that's something that they need to let us know, and there's a formal process for that.
This is Elijah Brown. I have one request. on what Curtis was talking about and Jamisha was talking about and Mr. Woods. The only request I need is whatever information that the FEMA rep is going back to find out, we need somebody on the committee to get that same information at the same time. So it won't come from the city. We need to know that we have that information in hand and it comes to us correctly. So we need somebody off the committee to get it directly from the FEMA rep itself, not second-handed from the city itself. Is that possible? Hello?
Yeah.
Is that possible to send the information to somebody off the advisory committee directly at the same time you send it to the city?
In other words, can you do correspondence?
Yes, exactly.
I'm going to get that information in writing, and I will get that to Foster. And Foster, the email that you sent us Saturday about this meeting, if that's where you want us to reply all, is that what you want us to respond to?
You are more than welcome to reply all. She has all of your email addresses.
Okay, we'll do that.
I have a question.
Oh,
Reggie.
if I could get back, just a couple of things. Go ahead.
We keep hearing about this environmental stuff. If I'm not mistaken, and I could be, I think it's been since May. Here it is, January of a new year. Where are we with that environmental stuff?
So we right now, the consultant is still in the design phase, and they have provided FEMA with 3 sections of the document. 6 sections that go along with that. So we are halfway through, but it's not finalized yet.
Why is it taking so long for the environmental study to be done?
So environmental assessments can take up to a year. That is par for the course. We are waiting on information from the community. We're waiting on information from CPL and the city because we have to know the design plans, the scale, what it's going to look like. So FEMA needs all this information prior to making the decision. So tonight, with them presenting what the building was going to look like and where it's going to be and all of that, that's integral information that we need as a part of this document.
Okay, what information do you need from the community?
So the city is the applicant, and so the city, working through their consultants, is who provides us with the information. CPL hosted multiple public meetings that I attended where the community was able to provide their input, and the consultant firm CPL with Reggie and his team are compiling that information, and they provide that in the document. But since the city of New Bern is the applicant, FEMA works directly with the city as their applicant.
Okay, then I heard you say something about the design process, that CPL has to provide you with the design process for the location.
But that's what we're doing tonight.
Okay, so I got that, Reggie. I'm trying to send something down with Chelsea. If the design process is part of the assessment, should there have been 2 design processes, one for each location, or is that one design process for both locations?
It's right now, the way that the environmental assessment process looks is that design process is for the preferred alternative, which what FEMA has right now, the preferred alternative is the city's choosing to relocate. The city, in the environmental assessment process, they need to provide us why rebuilding in that location is not feasible. And so Reggie and I are working through that section as we speak, and so they need to provide that information. And so until I can find information about you guys building a larger building in that other location, which I'm working on that email as we speak, that they can put that in that environmental assessment.
So can I ask my question really quick? Because that kind of leads into what I've been trying to ask. Reggie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I think in that April meeting when we were doing the craft in that West New Bern, I had asked what was the purpose of doing it, if we could have 2 designs for each location because we weren't sure of where it was going to be. I just kind of wanted to know who decided to do the rendering of the 3rd Avenue location tonight instead of presenting us with both of those designs as asked back in April.
So, and let me ask that question, then I want to go back and respond to a question you raised about 10 minutes ago with the meeting at the gym. So the process in itself, let me make sure that we understand, we are the consultants to design the new facility. We are not the consultants who are engaged with FEMA in the application for the grant and all those things. So when we walked on site, our focus has been, you can build it in the existing location or you can relocate. That's in accordance with FEMA standards. Chelsea, jump in at any time if I'm misstating anything. The policies as it relates to these hurricanes evolves. There's some new findings and new directives that have come out. The encouragement part of that process is to get these facilities out of the floodplain. That's just part of the guidelines. In terms of the EA and how we got to this point, because the existing site, in my understanding of FEMA guidelines, you can build, the existing footprint, there's really not a lot to evaluate there. That kind of is what it is, if you understand what I'm saying. And so you're placing the building back in the existing location. Nothing changes. The parking, utilities, all that, it's the same. So you've got that piece. That's in the document, by the way, rebuilding the existing space. If you're looking at a new space, that's another evaluation that we're looking at in much more detail because it's a larger footprint and it allows the opportunity to pull in all of the thoughts, opinions, values, and ideas that we have collected since we began this process in September. So we're bringing all the things the community is interested in and placing it in that site. So that's 2. Now, the city also looked at additional sites outside of the 3rd Street site. And we documented those as well, and you'll see those in the EA and the reason why they were not taken forward for further consideration. So does that respond to your question? Obviously, we came on the site in August, but does that respond to your question?
Mostly, yes, but I didn't know that either, that the city looked at additional sites on top of the 3rd Avenue site. So that's new to me
yes.
too.
Yeah, that'll all be documented as the part of the study. Now, I also, if you'll allow, just to go back to when we were at the gymnasium and the comments that were made, comments I made in terms of rebuilding on the existing site, that has been my understanding of FEMA policy, again, since we came on the scene, and the things that I've read as it relates to the application. Rebuilding existing footprint, not more, obviously you can do less, but not beyond that existing footprint, okay? But I also wanted to go back, there's some comments about the floodplain and, the studies, the master plan efforts that are in process, possibly making the existing Stanley White location, more favorable or I guess, less, exposed to any flooding. I'm working my way through those master plans and those studies, and the initial information I'm seeing is not showing that, but we'll have more information as we go through it and we'll document it in detail to kind of show what's done. I guess the big part of that whole thing is the floodplain is so varied and broad, and there's so many issues associated with it. Changes or improvements in this space may not help this space. So again, we're working through that process, and you'll have an answer on that.
Okay, so just for clarification, there was as much energy spent in the renderings in designing the new location as there have been in looking in the environmental issues and flood plan of the existing location to decide a design that could have went there.
No, I think they're all there are 2 sites, and I'll say this, there are 2 sites that were looked at that were dismissed out of hand. Proximity to the neighborhood, they're actually in the floodplain, the safety of the public actually accessing those sites. So those were not carried forward for a detailed study. The Third Avenue site is outside the floodplain, and that's the one we're looking at. Again, we can build back in the same location, same footprint, but again, the balance is that option against having a larger facility that is much more reflective of the needs of the community today. And again, that's an objective view. I'm not trying to sway you either way, but this is the information that we have today after going through a few months of public engagement and outreach.
Got it. So in lieu of the new information that we received today, that there could possibly be a route to build back bigger in the new location, I know we're going to pause, but
and I don't know that. That's a question that FEMA's going to have to answer.
Understood.
In terms of alternate routes to do this thing. The one thing I will say is, and it's come up a few times during the course of the committee meetings, and to be clear, the Board of Aldermen have the final decision, but this committee, they're looking for a recommendation. So I want to make sure everybody's clear on that. And so there is a meeting scheduled at the next Board of Aldermen meeting, not a meeting, but a presentation at the next meeting. And I believe the plan, Foster, was to take the recommendation. And so what I would recommend at this point is to keep options open, get an answer from FEMA in the short term, and maybe it would be possible to get this group back together within the week to continue the discussion, because I really would not want it to go until your next regularly scheduled meeting in February. So is there any thoughts on that? To keep the process moving? And not trying to ram anything down anybody's throat, because if it does come out that there is an alternate process or an alternate avenue, then we can talk about that.
Once we hear from FEMA and get the requested information, we can reschedule. We can schedule another meeting and move forward.
How do you move forward with that information, with that huge variable that was brought to the table tonight? How do you move forward?
So here's what I would say. You've really got two options. If there's really no viable option to, basically, if the premise that we've been working under for the past few months, if Chelsea comes back to us and says, that's the way we need to go, then I think we all need to say, okay, that's the way we need to go. On the other hand, if she comes back and says, well, there is an alternative, I think we cross that bridge when we come to it.
Yeah, but no. Mr. George, with all due respect, okay? Let's slow down. Let's Mr. Reggie, let's process this slowly, okay? Chelsea has already said that is an option. We can't do anything. The city would have to then resubmit to FEMA based on that, which is what she said from the beginning.
Chelsea, let me ask you a question, because I want to make sure we're all on the same page. Chelsea, did you say that for sure is an option, or that you need to find out?
It can be, and there's some nuance with that, and it's tied to funding and a couple of other things. So I don't want to answer that directly, because program really has to weigh in, because I don't know how it was messaged to the city, because there's two funding streams and there's limitations on certain things, and I'm not sure. So I need to meet with the program delivery manager to get that specifically in writing, and so that we can get you guys all of that.
I'm sorry, Mr. Stewart, you can continue.
Thank you.
Oh, that was it.
Yeah, it sounds like to me that there's still a technicality, but the bottom line to it is it could have been submitted that way. And even if they denied it, it would appease the citizens. And maybe now it can't actually happen. So I don't see how you do anything at this point other than that meeting next Tuesday. This needs to, I don't know how that political procedure works. Maybe Alderman Harrison can answer this, or maybe Foster can answer this. They're city employees. But that needs to be brought to the board so that the board can discuss this new findings. Because if that is the case, then it sounds like this should be submitted in that fashion. So I don't see how we move forward with giving a recommendation without all the facts. I don't know how this board could do it, because it sounds like to me, based on what I'm hearing from the people that spoke, the recommendation would be to the board is if you can submit it within at the same location and ask for it to be a larger square foot through programming, then it sounds like that's what I would vote for. And maybe you go around and ask everybody on this board here, but I've heard Mr. Bernard, I've heard Jamisha, I've heard Talina, I've heard Robbie. That's a key piece, Mr. Reggie. I don't see how you move forward with that.
Any other comments from anyone?
I'm with Curtis on this. Until this gets squared away, we can't move forward. Okay? Because that's been the whole premises of this board. See, I was in favor of moving it up to 3rd Avenue based on the fact that, A, we get a better building. Really, that was it. We got a better building. Okay, but now you're telling me that we probably could get a better building in the same location? Even if the probability is 1%, that's where I want the building to be at. It's in the old Stanley White location, if we can get a better building. So that needs to be cleared up before we can go any further, period. And it needs to be in writing. It doesn't need to be anybody's word. It needs to be in writing, one way or the other.
And I agree with everybody's stance, and I just have to, reiterate that, again, there's 7 people, as you guys know, on the board, and 7 people, you have to have 4 votes. And even if I go on Tuesday and bring up this newfound information, I still have to have 3 other people that agree that it needs to be resubmitted to allow for approval or denial from FEMA in regards to it being built back in the same location, as I've been saying from day one. So that's the problem. So if you are listening, if you are watching, if you heard this information and we do get clarification, make sure you call your alderman and your mayor and let them know how you want them to vote in regards to this application being resubmitted for the 3rd time to FEMA.
I'd like to say a few things. Alderman Harris, she's doing the best she can, but we heard from City Hall that if it were built back in the same location, that it would be the same model. City Hall fed that to us, and we started believing it. Then we knew if we had it built further down, Mark kept saying 600 yards. If we get it 600 yards down the street, that will be twice as big or better. Stanley White was all right, but it had outgrown itself. So having a larger one and a better one is good. But if we could get it in the same spot, I wouldn't have never complained about that. The problem was if we can't put it, it had to be elevated up. If it wasn't elevated up, if it was in another flood thing that insurance, Mark explained to us about how the insurance wouldn't handle it. So I'm with Curtis and Mr. Woods and everybody else. We need a little bit more on this. This is something that is like somebody telling you can get cake and ice cream if you come over on the other side of the fence. When the side of the fence you was on, you wouldn't really stay there. And then when you move over, you realize, hey, the grass wasn't green on the other side. So there's a whole lot of things that we need to do and we need to see. And we as the committees, we were asking to get reports from the city every time they would meet or whatever. They never gave us a report from the time on. We sent all those letters in to FEMA. So I'm not down there. I don't want to say too much about it, but I know I don't want anybody to think I'm trying to push them or do anything else, but we got some good points here. We need to find out how it's going to turn out.
Any other comments? All right, we will get some information from FEMA. That will be forward. That basically Chelsea will send that information out. We will also get some information from Alderwoman Harris mentioned Corey, who is a FEMA consultant that's been working with us through this process. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to say one thing before we make a motion. Can I get some information on this meeting we had tonight? Or is there somebody recording this?
This will be uploaded onto the Stanley White Recreation Center site. It should be, we should have that uploaded tonight, tomorrow. It'll be by lunchtime tomorrow, I believe.
Yes, sir.
So when is the follow-up to this meeting? Are you saying that that needs to be once Chelsea sends the information? Or are you saying that that needs to be after the next meeting for the aldermen on next Tuesday?
I'm going to have a discussion with the city manager. We've got to get information from FEMA, so we will be back in touch with you. I don't know that it will not be before the next Board of Aldermen meeting, which is basically Tuesday of next week.
Okay, so Chelsea, do you have an idea of when you'll be able to send that email to the folks here?
I asked for it as soon as possible, so I'm hoping to get it by tomorrow, close of business, but I cannot make any promises.
Okay.
And dealing with the issue of doing that, if it does turn the other way, then we'll pick up where we left off and keep on going. Nobody mind. But we want to know if we've been getting what they call the rope-a-dope or hoodwink or whatever it is. We want to know about that.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 All opposed? Folks, have a good evening. We'll talk to you soon.